My sister was at the door last night. I'm not sure what to do. I could hear her outside. It couldn't have been her. She died 5 years ago. I think I'm going back tonight. This has to be someone playing a sick joke, and I'm going to confront them about it. But let me back up and explain. I'm currently staying in a small tin roof cabin on my grandma's property. Her family had built it in the late 1870s as a farmhand's home. Today, she uses it for storage. Growing up, my sister Annie and I would play here all the time. My grandma asked me to come up this weekend and clean it out for her. I've been stressed at work, and the weekend getaway sounded nice. Friday morning, I pulled down the long gravel drive of my grandma's house. Luckily, I got the day off work and don't have to be back until Tuesday. It was a cool autumn morning, with a light mist and overcast. My grandma and uncle were headed to the city to visit my parents, the anniversary for my sister passing. My uncle left a couple supplies for me, plenty of food, lanterns, and even made a propane-fueled hot plate for cooking. He goes there sometimes when he needs his space. It's a 2-mile hike through the woods and pasture to the cabin. The land layout is odd, to say the least, and completely secluded for miles. The cabin has always been built on top of a steep hill. At the base of the hill is a land bridge. On both sides of the bridge is a pond my uncle dug out for his cattle in the 90s. Luckily, the water is low, so passing the bridge was no problem. As I climbed the hill, I was happy to be close. I could hear the low rumble of thunder in the distance. The old wood door squeaked open. As soon as it opened, I was hit with the distinct smells of dust and cedar. Just as Grandma had said, my uncle's supplies were on the table. Cast iron pots and pans, canned chili, bread, bottled water, lanterns, batteries, hot plate, air mattress, blankets, and a pillow. I was excited to spend some time away from civilization and focus on my writing. The cabin is simple. The front door enters right into the kitchen and dining room. There's a small wood-burning stove, icebox, and a wooden table in the middle of the room. The kitchen leads into a small sitting room with wicker furniture and a large area rug underneath. A wood-burning fireplace rests in the far corner. Pale yellow sunlight fits the room through dirt-stained windows. As I wandered through the cabin and began my cleaning, I noticed something different. A painting. A pretty big painting. It was strange in itself, but so was its location. The painting was placed over a large window near the front door. The painting depicted an exact landscape rendition of the land directly behind the actual window. The window faces west, so someone must have hung it up to block the evening light, an artistic alternative to curtains. The painting was perfect size, covering the entire window. What's really interesting is the setting of the painting seemed to match the exact weather outside at the moment, possibly an effect from being in front of the glass. The canvas and paint are somewhat translucent. Tap, 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 tap. The rain started pounding the tin roof. The flash of lightning and bolts of thunder made me jump. The lightning struck just behind the painting. I couldn't believe how clearly it lit up the colors of paint. But I also noticed something. Something I didn't see before. I got up and walked over for a closer look. The pond. The pond in the painting. There was something there. I took a closer look. It's strange, but there was a small, round, black smudge slightly sticking out of the water. The smudge stuck out in an unnatural sort of way, different in color and shape of the other painted rocks in the pond. It just seemed so out of place, and it was glossy, like it was still wet. I'm surprised I didn't notice this before. I lit a couple of lanterns as sunlight began to disappear behind the dark clouds, and I decided to get started on dinner. A can of chili and some crackers. Having just pans and a hot plate kept me limited as I looked through my uncle's supplies. Bingo, a full bottle of bourbon. My night of eating chili and playing solitaire just got a little more tolerable. 15 minutes and a half cup of bourbon later, and another strike of lightning. I happened to be looking at the painting. Something was wrong. My heart felt like it stopped. An uneasiness filled my stomach. The black smudge, it's bigger. I crept forward with a lantern. I could make out the smudge now, still seemingly wet with oily paint. Definitely bigger and more defined. It was not a smudge at all. It was a head. A human head breaking the surface of the water. Dark, wet hair covering its face, and it was facing the front door of the cabin. Now this scared me. Why would someone paint this? I assumed my eyes must have been playing tricks on me. No one else could possibly be in here, right? I did not notice the head earlier. Was someone messing with me and the painting while I wasn't looking? There's no way. I've only been outside a couple of times to use the bathroom since I got here. I was starting to freak out a bit. I decided to build a fire and drink more bourbon to get my mind off of it. I thought I was just scaring myself, and the thunderstorm wasn't making it any better. I decided to cover the painting with a sheet. A few hours later, I heard it. I froze. Someone was knocking at the door. That can't be thunder. Who would be here in the pouring rain this far out in the country? Emily. The voice screeched inhumanly, but I know my sister's voice. It was hers. At least it was close to hers. The voice was calling my name, but it sounded off, like it was underwater, scratchy, and broken. Like something that hasn't been spoken in many years was attempting to communicate. It knows my name. It knows I am inside. I was horrified at this point, paralyzed by fear. I pulled out my phone. No service, of course. Let me in, Emily. I was shaking at this point, trying to sit as still and quietly as possible. Then it stopped. Just as the rain started to taper off, I was too scared to open the door. That was last night. I ran back to my grandma's house this morning and posted this. I'm not sure if I should call and tell her what's going on or call the police. I'm going back tonight. This has to be some sick joke, and I'm not going to let someone mess with me like this. I forgot to mention, this weekend, 5 years ago on a rainy night, my sister crashed her car into the river, and she drowned. This is my final update. I'm currently working with a detective, and we have a lot of work to do. I will keep this short and give a detailed account of the evening following my night in the cabin. I was unable to reach my grandmother or uncle that following morning. I did, however, get a hold of my mother, but I could tell the day was affecting her. The last thing I wanted was to upset her with my story, so I kept the details of the previous evening to myself. Annie's death hit her the hardest. After posting my last update, I headed back to the cabin. This time, I decided to bring one of my grandpa's old rifles. Whether or not someone was trying to scare me or hurt me, I feel as though someone is more likely to stop when facing the wrong side of a gun. The last day started out normal, pleasant even. I spent the majority of the day cleaning the floors and shifting through my uncle's useless junk. As far as the painting, I decided to keep it covered with the white sheet. It wasn't until the sun had set that the rain started again. I had just sat down to dinner when I noticed the sheet covering the painting. Near the center was a small, dark dot. As I got closer, I could see wet paint was beginning to seep through. I thought to myself, there must be a hole in the window or something causing a leak, and it's making the paint run. Without hesitation, I started taking the painting down. The thing weighed a ton. I unhinged it from the wall, one nail at a time. Once on the floor, I checked the window for holes. But what I saw nearly made me collapse. It was back, standing at the edge of the pond, with dirty, wet, dark hair covering its face, torn and filthy clothes loosely hanging from its skeletal frame, staring straight at me. This time, I didn't freeze. I quickly grabbed the rifle and stepped out onto the wooden old porch. "What do you want?" I yelled over the heavy rain that was crashing onto the tin roof, pointing the old Russian rifle straight at it. It stepped forward. "I swear I will shoot." Another step forward. "I am not joking." It continued its slow and determined pace towards me. Then, out of almost instinct, the old Mawson ran out. Nothing. The creature continued forward, now just a few yards in front of me. I must have missed. Tears streaming down my face, I worked the bolt and loaded my next round. The bullet soared right through its head, as if made of air. The creature remained unharmed. I could see the splash of the spot hit the pond behind it. I sat defeated in the rain, knowing now there was nothing I could do, pleading with this hideous nightmare to just leave, still trying to cope with my remaining sanity. The next thing it did caught me by total surprise. It walked straight past me. The smell of rot and damp moss filled my nose. It walked straight past me into the cabin, leaving black, thick, oily footprints in its wake. The creature walked right into the living room and stood on the rug, dripping black water into the fabric. And it just stared. It stared intently into the same spot on the rug, for what seemed like an eternity. After a few moments, I attempted to speak but was cut off. She looked right at me. I say, she, because it was Annie. My sister's cold white eyes stared straight into mine, with a look of recognition mixed with fear. Then she vanished. The next thing I remember was waking up on the floor. The first light of dawn filled the room. I must have lost consciousness. Within an instant, I remembered the terrifying events of the prior evening. I rushed over to the rug, still damp and dark in the spot where she was standing. The rotten smell still pungent. I pulled back the rug to investigate the potential damage to the unfinished wood floor. And that's when I noticed it. Directly below the dark spot, the boards were crooked. I quickly grabbed a crowbar and started uprooting the loose floor. That's when I saw a dark object. I reached down and pulled it out. Underneath was a small black duffel bag. It had belonged to my uncle. A bag which contents would change everything. And that's what brings me to this detective's office, explaining how I found the bag while cleaning. We are currently discussing the contents of my uncle's duffel. Numerous pictures of my sister, a lock of hair, which I presume belonged to Annie, his diary of twisted entries expressing his love for his own niece, and finally, brake lines and hoses. Lines and hoses that belonged to her car. Lines and hoses that explain the police report of my sister's accident 5 years ago, stating victim's vehicle contained excessively correlated brake lines. Failure to properly brake likely cause of this accident. I cannot wait to see this sick man behind bars. To my sister, I love you and miss you. Thank you for helping me help you. P.S. I saw your signature on your painting of the pond. I had no idea you painted that 6 years ago. You did a great job. See you someday. Emily.